to bring this meeting to order. If I could get everyone to take their seats, appreciate that. Good afternoon. Welcome to your Trade, Commerce, and Technology Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Members Bonin and Krikorian, and potentially soon the other colleagues, Buscaino and Martinez. So we're going to get started. Mr. Espinosa, are there any general public comment cards?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then public comment is closed. Unless there is an objection from my colleagues, I'd like to move to items 5, 6, 7, and potentially 8, if you are willing, and to take those items on consent.
5 through 8?
5, 6, 7, and I'm open on 8, but I'd like to take 8 unless there's do we have any cards on 8? Let me ask that first.
No, Mr. Chair, we have not received any cards.
Okay. Then in that case, I'm willing to take all 4 of those on consent. Are there any objections to that?
No. I'll move that.
Okay, so moved. So items 5, 6, 7, and 8 are done on consent, and we will move to item 2. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item 2 into the record?
Item number 2 is a Board of Harbor Commissioners report and ordinance relative to the proposed amending of the Port of Los Angeles Tariff Number 4, Section 3, piloted vessels traffic service, vessel traffic service invoicing and payment procedures, and item 370, vessel traffic service user fees.
Great. And are there any cards on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And colleagues, this item is, and Mr. Bono, when I chaired the ITGS committee, one of the things I like to do is to bring up the GMs on each of the committees and kind of go through a top 10 list of what the issues are. I found that was a good way to keep us informed of what they're doing, keep them apprised of how we feel on issues, and the top 10 we'll switch every once in a while, and we'll do it once a quarter for each of the agencies that we oversee on this committee. So we'll get started with that. And
Honorable Committee, Acting Chief Tom Gazy, Los Angeles Port Police. We have before you today the Marine Exchange, which is a vessel tracking system in and about the Port of Los Angeles. Handles about 4,400 landings per year. It's the only privately funded vessel traffic system in the United States. It's a system that was developed post-Valdez in Alaska for the safe ingress and egress of vessels in about significant major ports. There was a modest tariff increase to fund the system that's handled at Fort MacArthur in a facility referred to as the Marine Exchange. And with me today is Captain Kip Ludich, that oversees the operation for us, if there's any specific questions in relation to the system.
so tell us the increase, why is it needed?
So as the result of a decrease, about 1,000 ship arrival decrease per year over the last several years. We're currently running at about 4,400 a year. It was in the 54 to 5,500 a year. And bear in mind that unlike the port pilots, this program, it's a one-time fee upon arrival, and it also covers departure. It coordinates at sea. The arrival of these ships at a distance out coordinates the spacing tolerances between the ships as well as departure. As the result of a reduction in the arrivals of ships for a variety of economic issues as well as ship size increases, the tariff fees had decreased, and hence the request of a modest increase to offset those costs. We'd run a deficit in the couple $100,000 range per year as a result of the reduction in ship arrivals.
I guess it's modest in terms of dollars, but in terms of percentage, it's quite a large percentage.
Yes, sir.
But when you look at it compared to one of these large ships, and I guess the reason is the ships have been getting much larger, and so you have fewer ships coming through.
That's part of the analysis in terms of the reduction in the total arrivals. Yes, sir.
And how does it compare to other port fees, other ports and similar fees? Are they comparable?
In other ports, the costs are absorbed by the federal government. They're paid for by the shipping companies through the federal government. This is either the only one or one of the very, very few that exists and bill privately and do not receive support from the federal government for these programs for the U.S. Coast Guard. Although we do this in collaboration with the U.S. Coast Guard. In fact, generally there's 2 Coast Guard personnel on duty with the Marine Exchange personnel simultaneously, so that any discrepancy related to lawful orders are necessary. The U.S. Coast Guard that also mans the operation with the Marine Exchange have the ability to enforce those orders as necessary.
Colleagues, any questions?
Do we know,
Ms. Martinez, go ahead.
do we know if the Port of Long Beach is also increasing their fees so that people are not going, ships are not going around?
It's matched, ma'am. We're go through their process also. That was my question.
Great.
I'm not sure why, if I'm following why our port is treated differently than other American ports in terms of the federal support of this. What's the distinction?
As the chief mentions, this goes back to Exxon Valdez, which, as you may recall, ran aground in Alaska in 1989. She was outside of the vessel traffic zone. The thought was that if somebody had been looking down from outside, the grounding could have been avoided. In wake of that, the Coast Guard came up with the VTS 2000 program. It was going to take 11 years to put in vessel traffic services funded by the federal government, created by the Coast Guard. California, as California would be, said not good enough, we want it now. The Marine Exchange had a radar on the roof. The next day, they started a vessel traffic advisory service, but because there was no federal Coast Guard participation, the ships were not required to listen to what the orders were. 1st of March 1994, the agreement was reached between the Coast Guard and the ports and OSPR up in the state to put that Coast Guard member in and make it a mandatory VTS 6 years ahead of the Coast Guard's VTSs. And it's so successful and supported by both the Los Angeles and the Long Beach pilots that it has just continued for 20 years. So all the 11 other VTSs in the country are owned and operated and funded by the Coast Guard and the federal taxpayer. This one remains unique, but it gives the ports tremendous control over how they can tell us, and particularly, as the chief mentioned, the sequencing of the ships coming in every morning while we're sleeping. It's a parade, and we make sure that they're all in the right order, which contributes greatly to safety.
Thank you.
So, great. Well, without objection then, thank you very much. We're going to approve the CAO and port recommendations to adopt the city attorney draft ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move to item number 3.
And prior to that, Mr. Chair, would you like to reconsider items number 5 through 8 now that all the members are present?
Sure, the way we can have everyone vote on that. So if we could ask for reconsideration.
Yes, please.
Without objection, so ordered, and we'll retake those votes on consent as a full body, and without objection, so ordered. Okay, moving on to item number 3.
Item number 3 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Jeffrey Dar to the Board of Airport Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Why don't you, some of us have known you for many years, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to serve on the Airport Commission?
Happy to do so, and good afternoon. Obviously, the airport is one of the jewels of the city. It's a public trust. I happen to live for the last 30 years approximately within a few miles of the Van Nuys Airport. I am a lawyer, and I've been serving the last 12 and a half years on the Rent Adjustment Commission, another commission of the city, which I've chaired for about 10 years. So I'm very focused on and dedicated to what I can do to improve the city. One of my things I do in my legal practice and in the community includes international trade and commerce, which ties in obviously as part of the focus of the airport, both as to the public and consumers for flying and for actual commerce of goods. And so with that combination of background, skills, and my own personal community experiences as someone who lives near an airport, I even went to a now middle school, which was in the flight path every day, every hour of the Burbank Airport. So I'm very sensitive to some of the community issues, and I want LA to have a world-class airport, and we have a lot to do, and I'm hopefully can be part of improving the airport.
Colleagues?
Yeah, please.
Mr. Bonnet.
Thank you. Obviously, this is an item that I have a lot of interest in, given the airport's in my district. I appreciate that you were making eye contact with me when you were talking about your experiences underneath the flight path, because I have a large number of residents who are underneath the flight path. And I appreciate that you said that you wanted LAX to be a world-class airport. That is half of my mantra. I said we want a world-class airport that's a first-class neighbor. I've been glad to hear that the mayor has appropriated that phrase and our new executive director has as well. So I want to make sure you get both sides of that coin in there. Exactly. I know you've had a lot of experience in grassroots politics, and so I know you're sensitive to community concerns. It can be very hard when you're a part-time commissioner who gets these thick briefing books to have a good sense of what the community is actually thinking or feeling other than the public comment at a hearing, which tends not to sort of capture the flavor or certainly the experience of the folks who are living near the airport. So I'm curious, how would you go about really trying to grasp and understand what the community's concerns are?
And that's a good question. I like to think of myself, even though have a family, I'm a very busy attorney, also have always been involved with the community and not just in grassroots politics. I'm involved with many aspects of the business community. I'm also involved in other aspects of the community that are just community issues that aren't, that are nonpartisan and need to be nonpartisan. And maybe the best example of, just to share, when I was on the Rent Adjustment Commission, which I stepped down from effective yesterday, I think I was the only commissioner who ever went and was a Speaker of the Month to the apartment owners of Greater Los Angeles. And I did that within the last couple months. I've done that twice. And I'm just giving that as a representative example of what I feel rather than just talking abstractly of what I've done. When I was a commissioner, I don't think any person on that commission ever went to the apartment owners of Greater Los Angeles, let alone gave their afternoon to be a speaker and answer any questions. And I would feel that hopefully as by just being part of the community, I would be sensitive to being receptive and open, and I'm a team builder. And so in that sense, I would like to think of myself more as a community person, and it's hard to say how I would do this with the airports other than from my own experience of what I continue to do, and I would be open, receptive to all points of view and from all constituents, because the airport has to work for everybody.
So would you be willing to go to a meeting of the Westchester Neighborhood Council and maybe a board meeting of RSAC?
If I was asked to attend, I will share with everybody here, the problem with our city is transportation time because of how long it takes to drive anywhere. Putting that aside, the answer would be yes.
Great. Good.
And I feel that's part of what goes with the territory of being involved with LAX, frankly, would be all the people that I've experienced myself who would have those concerns, and other constituents throughout the whole region.
Great, I appreciate that. So as you know, there's a ton of stuff happening at the airport right now. I mean, we really are, over the past few years, moving forward with modernization at a pace and at a dollar figure that we have not seen before, and it's really something else. Is there any particular project in all of the modernization efforts going on that you're interested in or have a particular focus on?
I'm not sure if I'm prepared to answer that, other than I'm aware of the projects, both as just somebody who lives, but I've also, since the issue came up my appointment, been doing some research, and I have a lot to learn and catch up on. And my view is probably whatever I can do to be of help on the board, if I'm confirmed for the board, with just by whatever vacuum or by whatever is needed. I'm sort of somebody who is here to not just be a seat. So in whatever sense I could be helpful, and maybe any skill sets I have that would particularly be assistant, I'm here to do that.
Well, I look forward to working with you, and anything I can do to help, I'm more than happy to do so.
And I look forward to having the opportunity to work, if given the opportunity. And as I said, I view the entire city to be a whole region of where I need to be sensitive. So if I'm on the board, I would like to think that I would be open, available, and hopefully receptive to everybody, including the council offices and their members.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Krikorian.
I just want to say I think I've known Mr. Dar for 20 years, maybe, and the leadership, the forceful and yet calm and steady leadership that he's demonstrated as a Valley business leader, as a leader within the state bar, obviously a leader in the Democratic Party as well, makes me confident that Mr. Bonin, he could probably handle a Westchester Neighborhood Council meeting. I'm not, that might be taxing him a little bit, but I think he's going to be able to handle it. So he'll be a great appointment. Mr. Dar, thank you very much for your willingness to continue to serve our city.
The neighborhood council was the easier of the two I suggested, so.
Seeing no additional questions, I will add, I've known a number of people who've served with you on the Rent Control Commission, and all of whom have said that you always were prepared, you worked hard on that commission, you've given a lot back to the city, and we're thrilled that I'm thrilled to recommend that we confirm you, because I know that you're going to keep up that, consistent hard work on this commission. So, without objection, it's the order of this committee that your confirmation move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have item 4, which is another confirmation. Mr. Espinoza, would you read item 4?
Item number 4 is communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Nolan Rollins to the Board of Airport Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2019.
And are there any cards on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
No cards. Mr. Rollins, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked, the difficult question I asked Mr. Dar, which is, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Airport Commission?
I think on the why I want to be on, I think it's one of those no good deed goes unpunished. I was the chairman of the New Orleans Airport, responsible for hiring the then new executive director, but also responsible for reworking how the airport actually worked, its inner operations, also responsible for the hundreds of millions that we actually put into building and renovating the airport there for the Super Bowl. And then finally for supporting the mayor to do the due diligence to actually build a new airport. So they are in the process right now of building a new airport. So I think once those things were heard about my experience, not with just the operations of the airport, but with its economic impact that it can have locally from a job development opportunity, from a business development opportunity, and then also some of the global opportunities that exist that I think are incredibly important for an airport like the one here. So those are the reasons that I'm very much interested in this. I think as the President and CEO of the Los Angeles Urban League, I also think being an economic development organization that's very much focused on business development and job development, I think that this, in a time where there's going to be a tremendous amount of both public and private sector dollars spent on things like airports and other connecting pieces, I think it makes sense for this kind of voice to be at the table. So I'm absolutely excited about being a part of this and bringing my skill set and actual experience to the board and being able to hit the ground running pretty quickly.
Colleagues, questions? Mr. Bonin.
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Absolutely.
Glad to have you on board. I'm assuming you'll get confirmed. When did you move to L.A.?
It's been about 2 years now.
What was your first impression of LAX?
It was what I thought it was a place that had a great potential. But it had great potential.
That's both accurate and diplomatic. That'll help you very much in this position. You had the experience of both helping to sort of rebuild and build a new airport in New Orleans. I think that's a particularly relevant experience here because although we're not replacing the airport we have, we are building a new one sort of on the same footprint, step by step. Particularly with the ground transportation stuff coming online and all the terminal improvements. Same question I asked Mr. Dar, of the huge menu of different projects that are out there, are there any that you're particularly eager to sink your teeth into?
Well, I'm really interested in internal operations and construction. I mean, I think that understanding the internal operations of an airport and, one, how it can leverage the resources that it actually has is critically important, and that it's actually doing it in an efficient way. I think it's critically important looking at our overhead, looking at our flight dollars that are actually coming in and making sure that we're actually operating in a way that we're maximizing the money that can go back into the airport. That's really high on my agenda. And then the other part that's really high, again, because of experience, is construction. Construction and the construction-related pieces with the airport. You know, when you have a significant amount of renovation that's being done, like the ones that are going to happen, I think there's just tremendous opportunity for us to be really smart about how we do that work and how we put the opportunity out there kind of in the marketplace. So really, internal operations and construction management, and those are really two areas I'm very interested in.
I'm glad to hear you say that. The more I've learned about the airport over the years, the more I'm amazed that it functions on a day-to-day basis, because it's so complex and there's so many moving parts and pieces, and to be adding all of this construction on top of it, particularly when we start building in the people mover, is a project of enormous complexity, and I think your experience would help a lot. I want to talk a bit about community stuff, as I did with Mr. Dar. The construction itself may have an impact on the neighborhoods. The outcome might be good, but the interim process can be impactful. For instance, we're doing a lot of improvements on the North Airfield right now, so we don't need to move the runway. We can improve safety without doing so. But that construction is shutting down a runway, and as a result, a lot of my constituents are seeing more flights over their homes constantly, something that wasn't quite anticipated. So I want to make sure that the community gets brought into the loop on construction and stuff. I'd be remiss if I asked Mr. Dar to make a commitment that I don't ask you to. Would you be willing to meet with RSAC and attend a meeting of the Neighborhood Council at some point?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that when you're doing construction the way that it's being done on a very public sphere in communities and in neighborhoods, I think communication with the surrounding public is critical. And I think it's critical to do it earlier. I mean, we're going to know what the construction schedules are. We're going to know what's happening, when it's going to happen. So I think there's no reason why we can't have a good open dialogue with the community to give them the heads up, to let them know what's going to be happening. I think it's a critical component.
Great. And Jeff is breathing a sigh of relief. He doesn't have to go alone. Thanks very much. I'm looking forward to working with you. And as I said to Jeff, anything I can do to help you in the job, please never hesitate to ask.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any additional questions? Seeing none, I'm pleased with your background, our meeting earlier, and I'm proud to recommend that we move forward with your confirmation. So without objection, that will be the order of this committee.
Thank you, sir.
Move forward. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, item number 5. Oh, wait, we just did 4. We're going to jump back to item 1. Is that right? Okay. Okay. This is what I was setting up before we went into item number 2, was item number 1. So sorry for the confusion. So we're going to go back to item number 1, and we'll talk about that.
Item number 1 is a verbal report from the Los Angeles Harbor Department relative to the top 10 department priorities.
Good afternoon, Chairman Blumenfield and council members. Tony Gioello, Deputy Executive Director, Development of the Port of Los Angeles. I'd like to first maybe just state that these priorities are actually our CIP priorities. Obviously, we have a lot of priorities within the Harbor Department, and so these are actually the development projects as far as our priorities. And I'd like to also state that as I go through these, they're not in any priority order. These are just 10 big projects or programs that we have.
Too tough to put them in order?
Too tough to put them in order.
Waterfront's number 1 on their list. It made the list.
As would have been expected. It made the list. Definitely made the list. Yes. So I'll start going through these, and please ask any questions as I go through these. You don't have to wait till the end, obviously. It's whatever comes to your mind. Our first program is our TRAPAC Container Development Program. This is a 172-acre terminal located in the Wilmington area of the Port of Los Angeles. It's an automated terminal, so our budget is $510 million for this project. We've already completed 5 phases of the project. We have 3 in construction right now. We are recently awarded 1 project for a crane maintenance building, and we have 1 project left to go into construction after these phases. So I'll go through these what these projects are fairly quickly. The first project in here is our main gate and building. We have a new administration building for the Tray Pack Terminal folks. It's a LEED Gold building that they just moved into last month. The building and the gate program are about an $80 million program. We're about 90% complete with construction at this point, and we are trending under budget for this program. Some of the major elements that are left to go on this project are a pedestrian grade separation that crosses the mainline railroad track in this area. Our backline improvements, phases 2 to 4, is under construction right now. And actually, today was a milestone date. We actually opened up 4 new automated rows and handed over the Tray Pack, so they should be operating those rows today. That's about the entire phase 2 to 4 is about 50% complete at this time. That's about a $143 million construction contract. The crane maintenance building I just mentioned is about to start construction. It was awarded a couple weeks ago at our board meeting, and it's about a $9.4 million program. The last major element of this program is a intermodal container facility or rail yard for the container terminal. It's an $86 million rail yard. Again, it is fully automated, probably one of the most sophisticated in the United States, and it's about 65% complete at this point. We anticipate this element to be done in about first quarter of 2016. With the completion of this rail yard, every single one of our container terminals in the Port of Los Angeles will have on-dock rail availability. So it's a big, important project for us. Outside funding on the Tray Pack program, I mentioned $510 million is our current budget. We expect to be well under that at completion. And we have about $62 million in outside funding for this program.
So on that one, there have been some cost overruns, right? At this point, you're saying you're going to be well within the 510.
Yes.
Are there going to be additional budget increases that are needed as we go down the road, or you think we're...
No. We feel very comfortable in the 510. In fact, we'll be well under that aspect of it. The cost overruns that you mentioned, really what happened there is automated terminals are very unique. There was only one other automated terminal in the United States at the time that we estimated this in the beginning of the project at a very conceptual level, and this was in Norfolk, Virginia. And we estimated what was built in Norfolk, Virginia. And that was about a 10-year-old terminal, and what we built was much more sophisticated than that. And that's kind of a nutshell, kind of the bus there. The other bus was actually then our lease did not accommodate any type of changes once we set that budget. And so we had a lot of lessons learned on this terminal. A lot of business decisions were changed and revamped. So, yes.
And it's a very impressive I had a chance to go, look, and it's incredible. What's the estimated return on investment overall?
I don't have that information right now. Our last I recall was about 8%, but then we'd have to revisit that, especially with the decreased cost. I'll get back to you.
Or when it'll pay for itself. It's a certain number of years.
I don't know. We'll get back to you on that one. Yeah.
That can be for the next time if it's still on the top of the list, which it probably will be.
Oh, definitely.
Any other questions on item 1, or should we keep moving? Okay.
Well, Mr. Sheriff, I can. Obviously, Mr. Bond and I were really puzzled when the $500 million overrun of Tray Pack came before us. It's a point where you're seeing a new leadership now at the port that assures us that's not going to happen again. Because with those overruns, we feel that those could be dollars directed towards our waterfront development plans. So I appreciate the leadership from Mr. Soroka to ensure us that we would not have to experience that again in this committee and to approve these cost overruns. So I know that was more of a learning, a lesson learned, but know that Long Beach has an automated terminal. Is that ICT?
The Middle Harbor.
Middle Harbor there?
Yes.
Do they have any cost overruns?
Oh, yes.
They did?
Yes. No, yes.
They did?
Their overruns are probably more than our entire project.
Very good.
It's a different project, though. You can't compare apples to apples, so give them that. But it's ours is actually doing very well right now. We heard you loud and clear, and we put in a lot of internal checks and balances and peer reviews and other things to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
And in as much as it's probably going to be on the top 10 list for a while, it's going to be on a quarterly basis when we check in with you on these issues. That'll probably be a question we bring up every time. So
yes,
but that's good. Ms. Martinez, go ahead.
Yes.
So are these top 10 priority lists that you're putting together by department, are these your budgetary priorities, or are these items that you would like the council to fund?
These are all funded in our CIP right now.
Your priorities in your department?
Yes.
They all have been, there's been a budget allocated to each one of these?
Each one of these are actually in our CIP. They're budgeted. They're well on their way, and there'll probably be action items coming towards you for approvals, but they are funded on our end.
Additional money?
Not necessarily additional money. There might be some contract authorities or contract approvals that are required on some of these. For example, I think about a month or so ago, we were here to approve an amendment to the CH2M Hill contract for the Sampson Way project, which is on this list also. It's part of the LA Waterfront. So items like that will come before you.
And just we asked them to put this list together, and all the GMs different than their budget request list, because we wanted to, if there's a big policy issue that they're focused on, has nothing to do with budget, but it's a big issue in the department. I wanted there to be that forum where we're never caught off guard that some big issue is coming forward with the port or the airport or any of the agencies that we oversee. So I expect from time to time there'll be issues that have no budgetary impact, but are major issues, and vice versa. It's not just the tool to going to the budget committee. That's a whole separate tool that you have and request that's going to come from the budget committee. But at least that's my intention as the chair and the charge to all the 8 departments that are out there. When I ask for these top 10 lists, it's to get the dialogue and make sure that we as a committee are apprised of the big issues that you're facing, whether they're financial or not.
Okay. Very good. Next project on our list is our YTI container terminal development. You may or may not know, about 3 years ago, I think, we finished deepening our main channel to minus 53 feet. That was a huge project, about 10 years in the making. That deepened our main channel and approachways to allow some of the largest, actually the largest ships sailing to call out our port. But as an element of that, we have to improve the wharfs so that the actual ship can get all the way to the face of the wharf. There's 3 terminals right now that have that restriction where these large ships cannot come to the wharf. One is our Evergreen terminal, one is YTI, and the other is our Yangming terminal. The YTI project is basically a wharf deepening project where we drive a sheet pile at the face of the wharf, and then we dredge we're dredging one berth to minus 53 and one to minus 47 feet. That project is just starting construction this week, actually. It's about a $50 million project, and should be about a 2-year project to complete. There's a rail element of the project, which is we'll advertise in about 8 months, I believe, for construction. So it's 2 different elements in construction. Again, not a huge amount of dollars here, but strategically, again, to allow the larger ships to get to the berth is strategically important for us.
Questions on that?
The next 2 projects I'll list here are the couple transportation projects that the port has taken on along the 110 freeway. We have the I-110 SR-47 connector and the John F. Gibson intersection project. This is a project that transitions from the Vincent Thomas Bridge to the 110 freeway northbound. We're basically adding another lane. So right now, if you were trying to make that turn, there's one lane, you might be stuck behind a truck. So what we're doing is adding another lane in there all the way to the John S. Gibson off-ramp, basically to allow better ingress and egress in and out of the port. Just north of that at the C Street intersection, again where our Trade Pack terminal is and where the Wilmington community is, our Wilmington Waterfront Park that we built several years ago, is our C Street project. This is about a $51 million project. We're in construction. We're about 50% complete. And again, these are just transportation projects to get traffic in and out of the port. The project I mentioned before, the 110 SR47 connector in John Gibson, is about a $53 million project. And that, again, is about 50% complete. As part of these projects, we've had to build sound walls along the freeway per Caltrans standards. And we've had some issues with those walls that the council member knows about, some graffitiing that we hadn't had before. And we're working on that to try to...
Appreciate your responsiveness to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who are the primary beneficiaries from these transportation projects?
Really, anybody who uses these roadways. So it's not only the trucking companies in and out of the port, but it's anybody who drives that stretch of the freeway are benefiting from these projects.
Including our visitors, sir. Including our visitors as well.
Including our visitors, yes. That's a good point. Thank you.
Okay.
Next project on our list is it's a shore-to-ship power for our cruise terminal. Now, several years ago, we did build the shore-to-ship power facilities. This is so that when the ships are at berth, they can turn their engines off and not burning their generators and having diesel exhaust. So it's an environmental project that benefits air quality around the port. We built the current facility several years ago. And it worked, but did not work for every single ship that was calling there at the cruise terminal. We do have it in all our container facilities, our AMP, what's called AMP, Alternative Maritime Power. But the amping is very well, I'll say, standardized in the industry. The cruise ships, because of the different sizes, different type of power draws, we have problems plugging every single ship in. So this project is to put in a much more flexible power system so that if it's a small ship or a larger ship and they're just getting larger, we can plug these ships in and cut down those generators when they're at port. So this will be advertising probably in October here. It's about a $13 million project, and again, it's not a huge project, but a very important project from an air quality standpoint.
And the power for that's coming off the grid. It's not coming from renewables directly.
It's coming from water and power, so it's whatever they generate for us.
Okay.
If I can comment on amping our port, in meeting with Mr. Soroka yesterday, we are the leading port in this world. We're doing everything we can to reduce our emissions. We've come a long way, and looking at our reductions of NOx and SOx of over 80% in the last 10 years, we're gearing up for the Air Action Plan 3.0 and working alongside the AQMD. Just want to comment the port's commitment to continuing to address and being an advocate for improving our environment and working alongside the EJ community and others across the country, specifically with the EPA and the AQMD and CARB. So just pleased to know that other ports around the world are coming to us for guidance as it relates to improving the environment in such an industrial heavy-duty port. Thanks.
Next set of projects on our list is the LA Waterfront program. It was mentioned earlier. I'll mention a few of the specific projects in the program right now. Wilmington Waterfront Promenade. This is actually, it's a $52.2 million project to improve the Wilmington waterfront area at the port. I don't know if you're familiar with our Bannings Landing area in the port, but it's improving that area there. We'll actually be awarding a design contract at our September 17th board meeting, and then starting design for that important program. The Sampson Way project, which you've already heard about in recent weeks, so we're here about a month ago, the $13.6 million street realignment program. It's about 80% design right now. We will be complete with design in October, but we may not advertise pending we have about a $4.9 million grant that we're still waiting for to be announced, and then we have to do the proper paperwork for that. So we're expecting to actually advertise a project probably in February or March, if not earlier, if we get the grant all sewn up. We recently awarded a design contract to Populous for a $32.9 million project. It's called the Downtown Town Square and the Port Sakala Promenade. and we'll start designing on that in collaboration with our partner, developer of the Ports of Call project, who we are actually in negotiations with right now. And that's the last project on the list right now. Today is the Ports of Call redevelopment, and like I mentioned, we're actually negotiating with the developer now, and so I'm sure that will be coming to you fairly soon.
I had a great informative tour of the LA waterfront last week with Mr. Buscaino, and saw for myself what an incredible asset and potential there is there. So I'm glad to see that on there. And you may have some additional comments on that, Mr. Buscaino.
Yeah, as we know that we're just been laser focused on the redevelopment of our waterfront. I think we need to, as a city family, bond together to support both our waterfronts, or in the riverfront, or in our case, the LA River, and also the waterfront. That I believe it's moving along swiftly. We've been laser focused, like I said, to bring in retail, commercial dining. Ports of Call hasn't been touched in decades, and we're the last standing port that has fallen behind compared to other ports in the country as it relates to tourism, retail, dining, even hospitality. We lack the hotel space down at the waterfront. So I'd like to thank the port's commitment, even with their community investment plan, a 10-year plan that's going to dedicate dollars to both the waterfronts and on the Wilmington and San Pedro side. And I know, Mr. Bloomfield, thank you so much for taking the time there. Mike, you have relatives down there. Mr. Kokorian, goes to a number of our events with your family, with your sons, and appreciate that coming down. And we got to get Neri down there. And I know you've been there with a couple of events, but the Lobster Fest is coming. So anybody,
You can go kayaking there.
I'll get on that.
paddleboarding, kayaking, that's right, kayaking along our water. But even more so with the USS Iowa Crafted, we're going to bring a new brewery down there, and there's a lot of followers. A lot of folks love craft beer, and also the Cabrillo Marina pads that I showed Mr. Blumenfield, who walked the Cabrillo Marina pads. That's also just ripe for redevelopment. And I was told yesterday that we're going to focus on the Cabrillo Marina pads and also the Outer Harbor once we solidify a lease agreement with the Rakovich team along our LA waterfront, so at Ports of Call. But as you know, we're leading with a sense of urgency. We want to get shovels in the ground and move quickly on these projects.
Yeah. I probably should maybe add our executive director, Gene Soroka, committed to the community through what we call is the public funding investment plan.
Right.
About $200 million over the next 10 years, split evenly between our Wilmington community and San Pedro community.
And then what we're doing on our side on properties owned by the city and also the port is looking at activating our vacant lots to bring in more residential and density. So how we're different to colleagues in other ports around the country is they have a downtown that's built within their waterfront. And we don't, but I'm saying let's build our own downtown. We can bring millennials. We can look at live-work lofts so people can live, work, and play and dine along the LA waterfront in the San Pedro and Wilmington areas. And we're moving on a feasibility study on identifying these properties, and I want to thank the port's commitment to help fund that study, that feasibility study on bringing density and bringing housing in a time where the city's thirsting for housing. We're saying we are open for development down the waterfront. We encourage it, we want it, and we are looking to add density down on our water line. Thank you.
It was very creative the way Mr. Soroka was telling me about it's not a set amount of dollars that's going, but it's a percentage. You sort of tied the fate of the success of the port with the success of the community benefits, which is a unique approach to both make something happen and get community buy-in, which I thought was a creative and good approach. Yeah. But no other questions on that end. We can continue.
I just have a quick question.
Martina.
What is the timeline on the waterfront development?
These projects that I mentioned earlier, the Ports of Call, the Town Square, the Sampson Way, and the Wilmington waterfront, should all be done within between 3 and 5 years. And then there's another 10-year program, or another 5 years after that we've committed monies to. But those projects haven't been identified yet. We'll go through a community process to get input, and then our board.
We'll start seeing first phases in the next 5 years?
Oh, yes, yes. You'll actually start seeing, and we've done a lot already. We just completed our downtown harbor within the last year and a half, I believe, 2 years. But you'll start seeing, if we advertise in the first quarter of next year, by next summer, you'll start seeing some construction of some of the roadway improvements. The next program is our 10 megawatt solar power installation. Now in 2007, as part of our TRAPAC program, we had a commitment, or we had an agreement with the California Attorney General's office that we would put 10 megawatts of solar within the port boundary. In 2010, we put 1.1 megawatts of solar on top of our cruise terminal at a cost of about $8.8 million for 1 megawatt. When we saw that, we said, we can't spend $80–90 million on solar right now. We got to try to be a little more creative in how we implement this solar program. So we partnered with Water and Power. So Water and Power has come through and they've put some solar on like our administration building and some other buildings around the port. But we are working with them right now. We joined up as part of the FIT program to put in another 12 megawatts of solar within the port. We're actually negotiating right now with a developer, a solar developer, as part of the FIT program. And we should be going to our board, I'd say within the next month or two, to award a contract to develop the rest of the solar program around the port. I don't know if there's any questions on this.
So the total amount of solar percentage of the harbor's?
We had a 10 megawatt commitment. We'll probably be a little bit over the 10, at least with these commitments right now, and possibly in future projects, there may be mitigations required on some of our projects for greenhouse gas reductions. There are some of our tenants are actually moving ahead with their own solar installations. The Crafted Brewery is actually moving ahead with some solar installations, a large warehouse there, so they have a beautiful roof to put them on.
It'll be the greenest brewery in the state.
It will be,
right.
yes. So as far as a percentage of our usage, I don't know. I mean, we use a lot of power at the port, obviously, with all the heavy equipment and the cranes and the amping and all that. So the solar power we use is just really helping supplement some of our uses. We are definitely heavily dependent upon water and power and grid power to keep the port running. Next project on our list is actually our smallest project. It's a $6.85 million beautification project. It's called the Front Street Beautification alongside our China shipping terminal. We actually just started removing some topsoil there, some contaminated material, and then we'll be advertising the project in a couple of months and building. This is basically a buffer, landscape buffer between our China shipping terminal and our community. And it actually, the key here, it would actually be the last connectivity for sidewalk and bikeways between the Wilmington and the San Pedro communities, connecting the entire LA waterfront. The last project I have is our Alta Sea development. Now this is a public-private partnership with the Alta Sea Foundation. This is a marine research facility in the outer harbor at the port. The port's commitment to this is rehabilitating a wharf and a roadway and ground improvements under a building. So right now we have done some conceptual work on the design. We've actually done some value engineering looking at what we can do to cut the cost of the wharf improvement projects. We're actually going to have to do a supplemental EIR to implement what we are recommending as far as a wharf improvement. But we will save significant amount of money on what was initially proposed. At first we were going to rehab the wharf, and it was almost $58 million just to do a wharf rehab. Looking at all our options, we decided it's actually better to tear out the wharf, build it new, build it to a better strength, and cut the cost almost $15 million. And so we are moving ahead with that. Alta Sea, they are going to do all the adaptive reuse of the buildings. There's about 400,000 square foot buildings on this property. They will build a unique, iconic building as part of their development. But most important, I think, it's the research that is planned to go into this area to look at all the water quality and ocean issues around the world that be centered in this area. It'll probably be rival what we have down in La Jolla, down at Scripps, and it's a very exciting project for the city of Los Angeles. Right now, We are waiting. Part of the agreement is that the Alta Sea folks have to raise a certain amount of money. I believe somewhere between 50 and 60 million. Don't quote me on that, but once they hit that, then we will start full-blown design for these improvements.
It's a potentially transformative project for the area and the city. But what are the key deadlines, though, for making it happen?
I don't have those deadlines. I'll come back with you for those at my next update. I think there was a 2017 update.
2017, January.
January 2017 for their first.
Phase 0.
Yeah. And that's where they have
We
to.
want to see everything done yesterday, but go ahead.
Yes, in our presentation with Alta Sea the other day, Mr. Blumenfield, it showed that they're going to create open access, open park space that's going to be the gateway to Alta Sea. And for us, we're finding any way we can to diversify the workforce down along our waterfront, and by bringing students, entrepreneurs, professors, startup companies, those who are in the green tech field. This Alta Sea project is, again, another anchor of ours. And with that comes the need for housing. Can you explain to us and my colleagues the interim use taking place right now with the announcement of a SpaceX there today, building their barge and using Alta Sea there?
Yes, so recently SpaceX has actually entered the picture down here as a sublease to the Alta Sea folks. And I think a lot of you know what the SpaceX program is. They actually launched the satellites, and they actually have a recoverable
Barge,
but the actual capsule or the launching rocket is actually retrieved. And so what the program at the Port of LA is they send a barge out with a tugboat to actually retrieve the launch cylinder, basically, and bring it back, and then put it back on shore at the Alta Sea location, and then bring it back to wherever they launch it again. So it's actually very exciting, very interesting to see what they're doing out there, and it brings another dimension, I guess, to this area as far as technology and science.
Great. Thank you. Any additional questions for the Deputy Executive Director? No, thank you very much for the report. We very much appreciate it, and appreciate being kept up to date on these important.
Mr. Chair, we do have a standing motion in this committee of bringing the TCT to the harbor area to address some of the waterfront, to get timelines on waterfront development. And I'm hoping that we can plan that for the residents down in Wilmington and San Pedro. I know we spoke offline about this. If we can prioritize that TCT meeting down at the harbor, I'd really appreciate it, sir.
That makes good sense.
Thanks, Bob.
We should do it, and we should do it on a time that we're getting the top 10 in the harbor.
Right.
As you're saying. So
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Great. Next is item number 9, and I think I'm going to ask that we hold this motion in committee, and we instruct the ITA with the assistance of the city attorney to submit a written report in October, because I think we need some additional information for that. So we're going to go ahead and do that without objection, hold the motion, and instruct ITA to submit, with the city attorney, to submit a written report in October, which we will review then. And that brings us to item number 10. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item number 10?
Item number 10 is a report from the City Administrative Officer relative to the approval of funding from the Innovation Fund for various projects.
Great, we'll get Mr. Sargent, Ms. Swan, come to the table and identify yourselves. We'll get representatives of the CAO, IPC, street services, all should be available as we go through the items. And why don't we start by giving us an overview of the first one.
Thank you, Councilmember. Todd Sargent, President of the Innovation and Performance Commission. I'm here with Bianca Swan, our staff liaison for the CAO. We have 4 items for consideration in this transmittal. The first is for the Bureau of Street Services smartphone dispatch of pothole trucks. The BSS requests $90,000 to purchase communication devices and support equipment for the implementation of this system. I believe that we have a representative from Street Services here to talk about that, and they can speak to it in more detail. I can say that the Commission actually spent a good deal of time around this particular item. We had tabled it for consideration until we received some additional information from Bureau of Street Services. We felt that the response given by the Bureau was sufficient for the Commission to make an initial recommendation for approval.
Good afternoon, Ron Lorenzen, Assistant Director, Bureau of Street Services. What you have in front of you here is our grant for this technology grant. Our grant intends to enable our crews and our supervisors with the ability to real-time interact with the new customer relations management system. It is a system called Axoft. Axoft is a mobile-based platform that allows us to remove paper from the system as we currently perform our functions. Currently, when we receive requests from the constituents of the City of Los Angeles, we actually take that request off the system by paper, go out to the field, enter that material onto paper, bring that back to the field, to the office, enter that information into our system by hand. It is then, again, by paper, given out to the crews to go out and do work in the field. And they, again, on paper, relay that information back to our system at the home base, and we enter that again into the system. This system will take all of the paper out of the system. There will be a seamless interaction between receiving the requests at the Customer Relations Management System, which is the new system that was launched this past month, and it will send that to mobile devices in the field, whether that be for inspection services or for the actual work being performed. The inspectors or the crew leaders will enter that information into their mobile device. It will then be sent back to the Customer Relations Management System. The customer will then receive real-time input from our inspection and from our work performed. They can receive text messages, they can receive emails, or they can go into the Customer Relations Management System directly and receive messages through that system. The needs of the system, we are asking for approximately $90,000 for this grant. The actual cost of the system will run between $200,000 and $300,000. We intend to utilize that money to equip our staff with smartphones. The program can only work on a smartphone device platform. We will then also be obtaining equipment to better utilize the CRM in the office, which will be hardware and software. For instance, the best manipulation of the data is by having dual screens so that supervisors and crew leaders can see the mapping on one screen and the actual request system on the other screen. And we will also be working with Axoft to do some custom programming for reports and to continue our interaction and interrelationship between the Customer Relations Management System and the mobile Axoft platform itself. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great. Well, love the idea. I mean, it's great. I love seeing technology used this way to try to better our services and better map the problem. My main concern is about exactly what we're spending the money on, not that we spend it on it, because I think it's a great idea. Do you have an itemized breakdown of how the $90,000 is going to be utilized?
Pardon me? Go ahead. I'll let Mr. Spots, our Executive Officer, answer that question.
Hi, I'm Greg Spots, Executive Officer of Street Services. I'm actually the applicant. I'm the person who leads our performance stat efforts, and it is really this grant is really an outgrowth of our efforts to use a CompStat-like process to optimize the street pothole turnaround time and the tree emergency turnaround time. And we've been able to really trim down those times using the existing resources that we have. But now we've kind of reached the end of that optimization without a further process improvement. Now what's remaining for us to optimize is this back and forth twice with paper. And so that's what we're trying to get out of, have a completely digital workflow for the street pothole and tree emergency eventually functions. So what we discussed with the Commission when they came and asked us if we had any neat ideas to apply for was the idea of having a limited budget to pilot the system on a limited set of functions. And we decided to pilot it on the street pothole function. We have 10 to 12 pothole trucks out in a given day, and the idea would be to inspect those locations and then dispatch the work using live GPS mapping and getting all the information from the field via mobile. So we see this $90,000 as being spent in about 3 equal categories. The first one would be on equipment, meaning smartphones, computers, monitors, servers. The second, 30,000 would be custom programming within ActSoft to get it to interact with the CRM, because each service request has to be passed back and forth through a data interchange, and also to get the kind of reporting that we need to continue advancing our performance stat work. And the third, 30,000, would be the subscription charges. The way ActSoft gets paid is you pay them on a per-user monthly basis. It's software as a service. Part of what we like about it is you're not buying a software system that gets outdated and then you have to decide whether you want to update it or pay more money to make it better. It's like Google Mail. It's constantly getting better all the time. There's, companies out there, the company that fixes your washing machine, the cable man, all these type of companies are using ActSoft and other similar vendors. And so new features are being added all the time, and all we have to do to get access to it is pay about $24 a month per user. So that third bucket is the data plan and the monthly ActSoft user charges. So we're not getting tied into one system. We're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a proprietary IT system. We're buying the right to use an off-the-shelf product that's constantly evolving. And from what we learn, we may or may not decide to use ActSoft or something even better as we learn more about how we can automate our work.
Well, if the first two buckets take up more money, then you're not going to have enough money for the third bucket.
Well, we plan to control our spend so that we have enough money to launch a pilot for the remainder of the fiscal year to dispatch all the street potholes using this system. And it's up to us as managers to make sure that $90,000 gets that job done.
But at this point, I would be a lot more comfortable if I had an itemized budget in front of me. That's usually what we have for these kinds of things where the basic structure, a third, sounds great, and probably is about on target. But I'm a little uncomfortable with it in terms of the specifics that we usually require for these kinds of things. I'd rather see an itemized budget.
We submitted that to the CAO about 2 months ago.
Okay. We haven't seen that here. So maybe we need to...
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of it?
I can speak on that. As far as the amounts that I have, it was changed to 50 and 40, and that was for PCs, servers, the smartphones, the custom configuration, and I think that was it. As far as the itemized list.
Do you have an itemized budget?
It's in the report, but that's the information that was made available to me for that.
Yeah.
So yes, 54 contractual services, which include 50 to 75 smartphones and their monthly data plans and their ActSoft service plans and the ActSoft ad hoc interface and customization fees. $40,000 for office administration costs, which include 20 to 30 PCs and printers and server purchases.
So, the 50 for contractual costs, that's not really itemized. That's the big number. So we don't actually have an itemized service.
This is just as far as the service plans and the monthly fees are concerned, that was the list that I have, but I don't have any specific itemizations for the customization for the 50.
This kind of thing would be good to see. And another question about a lot of departments use ITA to get good deals on the phones throughout the city, and the data plans. Has Street Services worked with ITA to try to get a bulk rate on the phones? And
we buy everything through Verizon, and it's a master contract with the whole city, and in fact, all the rates are standardized through, I think, the entire western region.
It's actually AT&T.
Oh, AT&T, right,
yes.
Sorry. But yeah, it's a giant master contract that's been negotiated for all different municipalities at standard rates.
Okay, because my understanding, the ITA usually works with the agencies. Maybe I could have ITA come up and ask if that's, Mark, if you can speak to that. Because I thought that's how it usually worked, but maybe ITA can let us know.
Good afternoon, council members. Mark Wolf, Executive Officer with ITA. That is correct. Mr. Spots has indicated the Department of General Services has established contracts with several different providers for cellular services. And ITA does work directly with departments in terms of communication, in terms of optimizing use of plans to make sure that appropriate plans are in place for different types of use. ITA has worked very closely with street services on this initiative, not in regards to the specific requests before you, but in regards to the coordination of having this new field system, Axsoft, integrate with the new MyLA 311 system. So we're very much supportive. This is a natural kind of outgrowth where kind of the back office operations, not only for city departments and elected offices, but for constituents, everything goes into the CRM system. But then in order for the field workers to be able to do things with their mobile devices, systems like Axsoft then will talk to the CRM system. So this is really a good investment to be able to automate the processes for field crews.
Councilmember, if I can just add to, from a commission's perspective, one of the reasons we held on the item was a question around just technology refresh in general. We were assured by the Bureau that, in fact, these were going to be dedicated devices simply for the use of this purpose only. So in other words, if there were already audio devices being used by the field workers, this would not, the technology that they had today was not upgradable to the point that they could leverage the system, the Axsoft system, for automation as opposed to the manual process today. And we did do a high-level return on investment to determine whether or not this would actually save time and money for the city. And there was a positive ROI on this within a 12-month period. However, I do understand the itemization concerns.
ITA can work closely with street services to look at the specific plans to ensure that those are the best use of types of plans for this application.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's, again, a great idea. I'm worried about some of these particulars about whether it's the best plan. Even looking at the numbers of the dollars per smartphone, it's, we're spending quite a lot for each smartphone for a function that really is, you could use on an old generation smartphone. These are not, you're not using it for all the different things that the smartphone would be used for. So I'm just concerned about that. And even with the computers, you're talking about purchasing new computers, don't quite understand why we can't use the computers that we have and how that would work. I'm sure there's good reasons for it. I just don't understand it at the moment. But if you wanted to speak to that, street service.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, remember that we have actually experimented with Axsoft without any funding from the city by acquiring some 2-generation-old smartphones from our carrier at no charge. So we're not going to buy iPhone 6 Pluses for this purpose. We'll buy a very commodity type of phone at the minimum specs that's needed to operate properly. You are catching the Bureau at a time at the end of the budget crisis where there hasn't been much in the way of computer purchases or anything else like that in quite some time, and some of the computers that are out in the field are not able to run the Axsoft client where you've got a live GPS map on one screen and you've got all of your service requests on the other screen. It actually requires a modern, within 2 or 3 years PC to run that app. It is an application that is one thing to understand about Axsoft. It's not an app. It's not a smartphone app. It's a server-based system that has both PC clients where the dispatchers and supervisors and headquarters work, and then it has smartphone clients where the people from the field interact with the data in that way, in touch menus. So it isn't just an app, it's a system. And when you run the system from headquarters on a PC, it actually has to be a modern, fast PC. We're not going to buy a whole lot of those, but we do need to buy a few of them for our dispatchers to have, 2 screens and be able to, see where the pothole trucks are and send, the real advantage here, the real opportunity here is, you get a pothole request in Sylmar and it's far out and it costs money to mobilize a truck out there or an inspector out there. And today, we just stack them up for tomorrow on paper and then send somebody out. But in this modern system that we want to build, we want to be able to say, a pothole just came in at 1:00 p.m. in Sylmar, and we happen to have an inspector out there in Sylmar right now. We know that because his cell phone is telling us that he's there. And so we can send through the phone to him a message saying, go inspect that pothole. And if in an hour later he inspects it and enters that it is indeed a pothole and needs a small asphalt repair, we can now dispatch that rather than wait till tomorrow. That would normally take 2-day cycles. Next, we get it on Monday, we inspect it on Tuesday, we fill it on Wednesday. That's about the fastest we can go with the paper-based system today. So that's, where the opportunity is. We have submitted all kinds of detailed information to the CAO and several rounds of requests about itemized budget. To some extent, we would like to have the management flexibility to get more smartphones or fewer smartphones or more computers or fewer computers based on how we find it works, because it is a brand new way of working for us and pretty new even in municipal government itself. It's a way of working that large organizations like Time Warner Cable have adopted a long time ago, but for us it's brand new. And so, there's some point at which the very precise specificity of exactly this many smartphones of exactly this model, we could provide that, but that might lock us into something that may not be the most efficient way to do it. But this really is a pilot. It's a very small project that's a pilot for a larger budget request in the permanent city budget to actually take this to scale.
Colleagues, additional questions? So, I love this project. I'm going to, though, ask that we hold it in committee at the moment, instruct the Bureau of Street Services to work with ITA to identify the best available rates for purchasing the smartphones, cost-efficient data plans, which I think they can have some value add to you all on that, and provide a more itemized budget, not to lock you into that budget, but just so that we can have a better sense of exactly, what is intended, but creating flexibility in that budget. Again, this is not to stop this project, because I think it's a good one, and I want to see it move forward, but just for today's meeting, I'm going to recommend that we hold it in committee and get pending those items, and then we will hear it the next time and try to move forward with it then. But thank you. Without objection,
We're holding this item till we get an itemized budget.
We're going to hold this item until we get an itemized budget. We're going to ask ITA to identify available rates, as they've done with others, to help make sure that it's the most efficient rate for the purchase of for the data plans, and then we'll come back to this at the next available meeting and hopefully move forward at that point. So without objection, that's the order, and we'll move to number 2.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'd also like to add that as part of the Innovation Fund, we're trying to set precedent as part of the Commission's review process to establish norms. And I will say that a good 25% of the submissions that are coming through are requesting some variation of smartphone in order to enable the solution itself. And so we do look to this committee and to the ITA to help develop a consistent strategy around how we want to move towards technology innovation within the city, so that we can apply that to our rubric for evaluation. Item number 2 is the LA Fire Department's brush inspection module. This is a $50,000 request to purchase, install, and implement a brush inspection module into the department's existing situational analyst geospatial platform. I'd like to ask Bianca Swan from CIO to give some more color on that.
So Los Angeles Fire Department is requesting $50,000 to purchase the license for a brush inspection module that will be integrated into the existing vegetation management system. This brush inspection module is a front-facing mobile interface that will, to the existing vegetation management system, and provides mobile capabilities to the field inspection process. The department also plans to use the system as a vehicle to assess components in the current vegetation management system that it would like to transition into a next generation vegetation management system. So I'd like to ask a representative from Fire if they could come up and speak to this, please. Thank you. We have Captain Geekus here to speak.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Captain Tom Geekus from the Fire Prevention Bureau, Fire Marshal's Office. I want to thank you guys for having us here today and the opportunity to discuss this application or module that we'd like to implement. We were able to pilot it in May for about 2 weeks to see if it had any value, and we were successful at it. We were able to accomplish about 8,000 inspections in 2 weeks with a very small staff. And I'll give you a quick overview. The brush zone is comprised of about 160,000 parcels of land that are inspected annually. We shift some staffing around every year to interface with that area to get these inspections done in a very short period of time. Previous systems and our current system does not have a, excuse me, an interface with a map. I brought these as an, excuse me for bringing my props here, but we have about 40 fire stations that have a component of the brush zone in them. And each one of those stations has a set of books, paper maps. We have a vegetation management system that's more of a tabular data, enter a parcel number, get back the results, but there is no interface to the map, so the inspector has to take both the map book out with them and look at the data to do their work. So we looked at ways to interface with existing technology, existing licenses, with the mobile smart devices and the mapping that we currently use in our personal lives. So it's a device agnostic. It works off of Esri's platform, Esri Online. Built a really simple database for that to mimic what we have in VMS. And we're looking for the 50,000 to advance that and kind of integrate it into our existing functionality on more of the administrative side. So what I brought here today is just a sample of that if you would like to see it. But really, it takes the paper out of it, which on the back end we spend about a month's worth of time keeping these books updated with current parcel information. It's simply an overlay of parcel data that we're able to touch and do the work right through the screen. And then on the back side, the statistical analysis and the results of how things are occurring, both at the unit level and the executive level. We're using Operations Dashboard, which is an Esri-based tool that we already pay for with other licensing, so no additional cost there, to actually see the results and see how we're doing. With this platform, too, we're also able to provide other services as we go out there, which we never had the opportunity to as quickly as we're doing it with this, and that is every time we touch a constituent or a resident that has an issue, we can capture that in real time and push that back to the units that we want to. So a lot of possibilities, a lot of opportunities. We wanted to show this year in the pilot that it was a tool that could be used and actually accomplish the work in the field that we are mandated to get done. Because it was so successful, we did a small 3-district pilot. One of them was in one of the councilman's districts here at 78's where I work, or I did work at the time, I'm since transferred. And it accomplished what we thought it would accomplish. So again, the 50,000 is the start of getting this stuff integrated and then getting the functionality into doing things more with geospatial information and analysis of the brush zone. So if you have any questions on that, I can elaborate.
Great. I think it's a great program moving forward. But my only concern on it is the relation with the VMS. The VMS is kind of a mess at this point, right? The VMS system, how is that functioning?
Well, it's more of an administrative tool to bill. We get the information in there, but it's not really field friendly. I call it like that. I mean, you can't log in remotely to it and have this type of functionality. It really is merging what's commonplace in the smart devices, the GPS tracking, and the overlay of data. So VMS doesn't have that. VMS is strictly just APN parcel information.
And the idea is to ultimately is, and there was a budget request last year which we unfortunately weren't able to fund to get a whole new VMS, and I believe that's going to be in this year's budget request is for a new VMS system. So what we're looking at here is kind of a Band-Aid or a transition until we can get a new VMS system?
I think a little bit of both. I think that the functionality that this provides to the field inspector will increase efficiency, reduce workload on an administrative level. The other components of VMS, where you talk about the administrative process, the appeals and all that stuff, that piece may need to be rebuilt, or with all the technology initiatives that are going forward in the Fire Prevention Bureau, we're looking to make sure that this component or this functionality fits into that. So there'll be a heavy GIS component to our next inspection module or inspection system for fire prevention, and this is a portion of that. So
mean, even if it were just transitional, I think it's a good thing, but I like hearing assurances that we're not just kind of throwing our money away for a one-year project that's going to be obsolete because of the new system, but that it actually, hopefully, we get the new VMS system, it'll improve the functionality of that system as well.
I think that when I don't want to misspeak of why the next generation of VMS will have this capability. This is what we need now, because we're leveraging existing licensing from ESRI and some of the things that are basically out of the box with their AGO Online stuff. Without a doubt, I can assure you that was part of why we needed to make sure it actually worked in the field. And I won't get too in detail, but yeah, it's...
Colleagues, additional question? Corey?
Yeah, thanks, Captain. You mentioned, I thought I caught you say something in passing, that there's other services that the department will be able to build upon the brush inspection component of this. What sorts of other things are you talking about when you say you go and make contact with?
The brush inspection program is very successful, but it also every year raises a lot of phone calls into the brush unit. By having this information digitized and in the format that it's in, we can push it out in various ways to educate the public and answer their questions and offload call loading. So one of them being, has my parcel been cited? It's very expensive to send a piece of mail. Log in here, you can see if we've inspected your parcel. Because of the way we're collecting it as a layer of data, you can then post it up in different ways. And again, it's a lot in coordination with maybe other technology initiatives we have going, but it opens up those opportunities. Case in point, in Fire Station 78's district, had a constituent come up to us and ask a question. I was able to capture that, exactly where he lives, type in all that stuff, and it's now captured to where we can send it to who we need to send it to, as opposed to a phone call, a voicemail. We have a record of it now, and we never really had that opportunity to actually calculate how much time is actually taken, not just in the inspection process, but also in the dealing with the public service that we're there for. So this has that opportunity for us.
I remember a couple of years ago, there was a tremendous backlog in the reports that were provided by homeowners indicating that they had cleared their own brush and demonstrating photographic proof and so on that it was cleared. And there were thousands and thousands of these that were backlogged. Is that the sort of thing that you could build into a new VMS and this system so that you'd be able to create a lot more efficiency in reviewing and analyzing those?
We're looking at what we call the three-tiered system, and that is what you mentioned, the opt-outs, the people that do their own inspection. And then we have the very high potential parcels that are in really bad canyons that present a high risk. Through GIS capabilities and technology, you're able to analyze that better, but we never had the data in that format. It's always been tabular paper that we've had to bring into the system. So the back-end analysis we haven't gotten into, and that's a portion of where we want to go with it. But hope that
Great.
answers.
Thank you. It's a big priority.
Mr. Bonner.
I understand that Chief Terrasas was speaking about this at the Fire Commission in early July and was talking about how this has increased productivity for the brush inspectors by about a third. Is that correct?
Approximately, yeah.
That's significant. Even if it were only a Band-Aid for a year, I think 50 grand is worth spending to increase the productivity by a third. Is this desktop or tablet or both?
It resides in the cloud for the GI, we call it Esri's online system now. We have an enterprise system within the city or within the department. We can host the data there, but really what they're accessing when they access the app is going to ESRI. So it's cloud-based at this point.
Great. So they're out there using tablets when they're out there?
Yes. Both Android or Apple. Doesn't make a difference.
And who's been helping in the development of this? Are the actual inspectors working on the development of it?
We had, it's a tricky question there. The timing of this was such that we didn't want to divert from their monumental task this year, and we wanted to make sure it worked. So what we did for the pilot, for this particular mapping pilot, was we put together about 4 four-member team that had done inspections previously. I was one of the members included. We also had some, ESRI was nice enough to donate some training time to show us how to set it up. But it was up really quickly for what we were trying to accomplish, and we were able to do 3 districts, 18s, 24s, and 78s, kind of a variation of the different possibilities in brush. And very little, I'll say there was no negative comments about how easy it was. I spent half the day with one person to teach them, and they're off and running. It's very intuitive, not too hard to figure out, and because it's a native piece of equipment that they use on their everyday life, they were off and going.
I'm glad to see the department getting religion on the concept of using tablets and tablet technology to increase efficiencies and do stuff. When I came onto the council a couple chiefs ago, that wasn't quite the case. I'm glad to see that Chief Terrastis is sort of moving in that direction. I'm glad to see also that you're working with Esri on this. I think we have such willing tech partners in Los Angeles who are really eager to help us. Sometimes it's hard for us to figure out how they can help us. I'm glad you're working with them. I just want to underscore the importance, though, as we develop apps, because the department will be developing other apps for other purposes. Really important that the folks in the stations are helping develop those apps. The ones who are actually going to be using them will just get much better technology, much more efficiency if we do that.
Additional questions? Okay, so, certainly going to recommend that we approve this item, and without objection, that's the order for the committee to approve this item and move to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Item number 3 is something the Commission's very excited about. The LA Police Department is requesting $150,000 to fund a new pilot program, which they've called the Identifying Super Users for Services via Outreach, or ISSO. The Commission has been looking for months for a pilot around homelessness issues, to be innovative around how we address that community. And the LAPD is going to be partnered with Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, or LAHSA, and their outreach staff, along with Central Services Safer Cities Initiative LAPD officers, on their footbeat in Skid Row to target outreach and services to the most frequent users of cities' law enforcement services. We did some return on investment on this, and it's astounding. The cost normally today, without targeted outreach, we're spending close to $50,000 a year on super users of city services within the homeless community, and we think that with this targeted outreach, we'll be able to save up. It will cost us upwards of $11,000 per user. As you can see, the more that we have outreach to within the community, the more that we can save both funds, but also lives, and also address important issues of the community. So I don't know if we have a representative of the LAPD here to help speak to the item. It also was very detailed in terms of the itemization of costs. And thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. I'm Captain Don Graham. I'm the patrol commanding officer of LAPD Central Area, which, as I'm sure you know, polices the area that's commonly known as Skid Row, the area between 3rd Street and 7th Street and Main Street in Alameda. I don't have to tell any of you about the importance of the homeless issues that are developing all around the city. But I also don't think there's any disputing the concentration of which is in the area that is that has the infrastructure to provide services. Unfortunately, the oversaturation of the area of the homeless population has led to an almost perpetual state of unprotected homeless, as was revealed in not only our bi-monthly counts, but also in LAHSA's 85% increase in the last 2-year period. Now, while LAPD officers, as you well know, are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, providing service, be it law enforcement services or outreach services to the homeless community, we are limited in our ability to refer or case manage these the super users. And by super users, we mean folks that are of the most vulnerable of the population. Due to their being homeless, they tend to be victimized more often because they don't have the protective shelter to retreat to that other folks that do have homes have. And so while our officers are certainly motivated to provide outreach services for both mental illness, for medical reasons, and to get people off the street for homelessness. We believe that the synergy that would be created by a permanently assigned team of LASA employees who are trained in outreach would greatly benefit and force multiply our efforts to get this vulnerable population out of the conditions with which subject them to the crime that we continuously respond into the area for. With that introduction, my partner, Mike Orb, and the actual, from our side, brainchild of this is Lieutenant Billy Brockaway. For particulars about the creation of this, I can refer to them. As far as the structure of the deployment, our partners from LASA, we have a representative from LASA here, and they will dedicate 2 LASA outreach folks to central area, along with logistics of vehicles, phones, in order to maximize their effectiveness while they come out 5 days a week and work side by side with our footbeat officers in the Skid Row area.
I would just like to add a couple of things. In the area of Skid Row, what we find frequently are a group of individuals that are service resistant. And when we're trying to seek outreach for these folks, it becomes problematic and difficult. But what we've also found out is that when we're involved in various types of enforcement, we create opportunities for some of these folks that are more motivated to get off the streets. And if we don't have those services and the providers with us at those critical moments, then we lose opportunities. So we also see this as creating more opportunities for us to identify and provide outreach to a majority of the people that would not normally seek these things out on their own.
Is the fire department involved, since they're responsible for taking people to the emergency room, or how does that work?
We have not discussed that with the fire department at our level, but that's something that can be created, and we can create that opportunity while they're with us.
But, Councilmember, if I may, I believe that the fire department would be inserted in this process when individuals have already exceeded that crisis threshold. The presence of LASA folks with our footbeats are looking at folks before they reach that crisis level. And as my partner has indicated, sometimes the uniform can be an impediment and cause some of that service resistance. And so having folks from LASA might have that softer hand approach and get some of those folks that are service resistant to accept some of those services. Another thing that I'm excited for in this grant is that it also, as minute as it seems, provides for funding to give these LASA outreach workers an identifiable uniform. All too often, when you look at Skid Row from day to day, this is the only suit that you see as far as outreach to these folks. And so if they're predisposed to not trust law enforcement, then there's the lack of an element of hope. But what we're hoping to see is that as our other city partners and our other governmental partners follow this example and become readily identifiable in Skid Row, that the Skid Row community can see that there's a multifaceted approach to the outreach for these folks and break down some of those service resistance barriers.
I think it's an excellent point and interesting, a good thing. Quick question for Mr. Sargent. You mentioned the $50,000 figure in terms of the cost. What is that? Is that city cost or is that overall government cost?
LAPD's study conducted in 2013-14 identified cost and resources associated with these super users and found that it cost the city $55,000 per user for transportation, officer cost of booking, and follow-ups with city attorneys. So that's the current state of affairs.
So the actual cost is even higher in the sense the $50,000 or $55,000 in that section is just the LAPD.
That's right. Not the medical
services
costs.
Expended.
Services expended. Not the host of other costs that go on. Mr. Bonnet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the Commission for looking at a homeless initiative. I think it's very important. I hope you look at more. I have another one for you, as a matter of fact, that I think is even more bang for our buck than this one. The county, in order to save some of its money, created a program for its super users for medical services. They created a flexible housing subsidy pool so that if you use an emergency room, a county emergency room, twice in like 6 months, you qualify for a fast-track housing voucher. It doesn't have the same strings as Section 8, VASH, or anything like that. They get them right in, and it reduces their costs. Most of LA City doesn't benefit from that. Like my district doesn't, because the nearest portal for it, for my district, is in Torrance. So I've had a separate motion asking the CAO to begin negotiating with the county about how we can buy into this so that our paramedics perhaps could be portals into this program, so LAPD or LAFD's frequent medical users could get into it. That's something I'd urge you to look at, and I'm happy to talk to you about it afterwards. On this one, I had a couple questions. I had the same question Mr. Blumenfield did about LAFD, and I sort of understood your answer, but I think what I need to fully understand it is get a sense of who these 10 people are. Are they the folks that you get complaints about? Are they the folks who are victims of crime, or are they folks who are identified by LAPD as being in physical or mental distress?
Our super user definition is someone who's accessed the criminal justice system 4 or more times in 2 years? 2 years. 4 or more times in 2 years, and accessed the mental health system more than twice in the same period. So those people we've identified as super users because of that level of vulnerability. I mean, I have numerous anecdotal incidences that I can bring up if you'd like to hear them. But simply the homelessness aspect of them, and as you indicated with your other project, getting them into shelter is the key to getting them away from that victimization piece. Most of these folks fall on the victim side of the DR number.
Is County Department of Mental Health involved in this?
What we're hoping is that the alliance that currently exists between LASA and DMH will be able to be capitalized on by folks from LASA being assigned to an LAPD station.
Because I'm thinking that your top 10 list won't be as accurate as it should be without LAFD and mental health being part of it.
Because of our partnership with MEU and their continuous partnership with DMH, they're what keeps our list updated. So we're in a constant state of exchanging information with MEU to identify who the super users are. There are some, of course, we have to uphold HIPAA and all of the privacy issues. So what we do is when we have a previously identified super user or somebody who's accumulated these DRs, we reach out to MEU and get a confirmation that they are in fact and also a user of mental health services. So that's for this particular acute population. We also think that we're going to gain a lot of benefit by having the LASA workers there and their ability to do day-to-day outreach that our folks are not able to do.
I just think you're missing a piece without LAFD as part of it, because they're the ones who are spending time transporting folks, and we'll have pieces of information on folks that you might not otherwise get from MEU or from just your foot patrol.
We can certainly reach out to them and see where they can fit into that puzzle piece.
We'll look into that, sir. Our challenge has been trying to filter through all the HIPAA regulations to find out how many of these individuals actually were medical. How do we capture that medical information and translate it to our case studies? And what we did on this particular study was we used our mental evaluation unit as the filter for contacts with DMH and the mental health system versus our crime numbers, and that's how we merged those two. The challenge was going through the HIPAA laws and trying to ascertain that information.
I get the complexity of HIPAA. I've actually been waist deep in HIPAA stuff in trying to come up with a top 10 list in Venice, for instance, and it's been a challenge. Other municipalities seem to negotiate it a lot easier than the city of LA does. I don't know why it's so difficult here for our agencies to share information. Santa Monica does it without any problems whatsoever. I'm happy to help with that because we've been working a different angle on it. The LASA, you're with LASA? Yes. Great. The two-person team assigned here, is this program paying for that, or is that something LASA is assigning without cost to this program?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Grace Weltman, Director of Policy and Planning for LASA. So these would be an additional team dedicated to this particular project. We do have outreach teams already dedicated to Skid Row, so this would be an augmentation of what we are already doing out there. Given that we're going to be targeting high-frequent users, I wanted to address the question about the connection and mental health services.
Wait, let me go back to my last question, though, because I get that this is an additional team. I'm wondering where the resources for that team are coming from. In last year's budget, the city approved, I think, 10 or 12 new LASA outreach teams dedicated just to the city of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
There's some LASA outreach teams already downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a LASA outreach team dedicated specifically to my district, which has the second or third highest concentration of homelessness in the city. So before LASA is assigning some of the ones we've just allocated, I'm wondering, is this one of those teams that we just came up with funding for?
No, this would be to support the actual innovation fund. This doesn't interfere with the existing teams that are out there, so this is for this particular fund.
Is this fund paying for these two positions?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
$111,000.
So this doesn't take away from any of the
No.
teams that the city created?
And I do want to report that we're waiting to hear back from the county. On September 25th or sometime in September, they're supposed to augment some more outreach teams,
Yeah.
so we're hoping to hear back from that, and it looks like it's a go, so we hope to expand our footprint across the county as well as deepen what we're doing in the city.
Okay, and then I interrupted your other answers.
Yes, I just wanted to talk about what we're doing in terms of by linking services, by having the outreach teams there, we're going to help, as you're very well aware of what ERT does, but connect them to crisis intervention services, housing, whatever their needs are. Our role is to help make that happen so that they get the housing and supportive services that they need. And we already work with the DMH teams as well as DHS has our Home for Health program. So our goal is to really provide and connect our homeless clients to the services that they need and in partnership with the county.
So I'd strongly recommend you bring LAFD into the loop on this sooner rather than later. I'd also ask if it could be a recommendation from the committee that 90 days or so and 6 months or so after this pilot has been launched, if you could report to the Homelessness and Poverty Committee and let us know how it's going, because it might be something we want to expand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Just kind of.
I had an opportunity to experience Skid Row with Officer Joseph just last week. It was just eye-opening. My probation here with LAPD in 1997, 1998, it has just worsened over the last 20 years. Based on my observations, I felt in my footbeat with Officer Joseph that the majority of the people living on the streets are all super users. How would you prioritize the super users moving forward as part of this proposal here?
A good portion of that's going to be the last time they accessed either one of the two systems. So as you saw in your footbeat, there's a lot of folks out there, but not a lot of them are and they have extensive rap sheets, or they have extensive experience as victims, or they have extensive interactions with MEU or the Department of Mental Health. So our prioritization will be simply working backwards from what the most recent that most recent intercept line is for when they access either mental health services or were the victim of a violent crime, and then we would work backwards from there.
Also, I would say that our Safer Cities folks, and we do have our MEU team based out of Central Division, so when they have the opportunity and we're bringing in those folks for evaluation, we would be able to have the go-to person from LASA to hook up with immediately. That way they're not lost in the translation. And when the officers are out in the field and they have contact with those super users, they will also have that go-to person where they could actually fast forward the process. And that's what we were hoping for.
I have actually a great relationship with my district with LASA. I appreciate the work that Eddie and I think John is doing on the ground. Amazing work, 71 folks that they've housed in the last 6 months, over 1,300 referrals. How do I get something like this in my district? Do I have to come up with $150,000?
Yes. Yes, basically, if we can get additional funding to do this type of work, then definitely.
And I like Mr. Bonner's idea to presenting this to the homeless committee, and to
Well, I
see
think
how
after
the best
90
practices and see if this will work.
After 90 days, we can outline what's happened, what have we been learning from this, what kind of outcomes has occurred as a result of this process, and maybe move forward with some type of models in your particular districts, or because as we spread out outside of Skid Row, these.
Well, just knowing I have our ERTs on the team on the ground today, we're just going to kind of elevate their commitment by putting this program in place.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I have to come up with $150,000.
Well, not necessarily, or the other thing is, if this pilot goes...
If it works, we go citywide with it.
That's
So,
right. We go,
great work.
I mean, that's the whole idea of this innovation fund, and this could be a great example of that, is you have a pilot, innovative idea, it proves positive.
Right.
We then apply it to the entire city.
Thanks for your efforts on this, amazing.
And it starts saving money. That's and doing positive things. That's the goal here. Additional questions, colleagues? Mr. Ford?
Yeah, good discussion about how we integrate city resources and identifying the top super users. I'm less concerned about the outcome of that, because this is a great step forward, but it's an infinitesimal baby step. And the top 10 super users, I don't really care who those 10 are, because we should be doing this for the top 1,000 users.
That's right.
And so whether it's this 10 or that 10 or the other 500, the impact and the obvious savings, the obvious improvement in our quality of life, the obvious assistance to the people in need is there. Now, that being said, the savings that you've calculated into this, that LAPD calculated into this analysis, is based on getting these folks into permanent supportive housing and the cost differential that you get from services on the street versus supportive housing. The problem is there is no permanent supportive housing. It's all vastly oversubscribed. We don't have a fraction of the permanent supportive housing that we need, and we don't have it where we need it, which is in the neighborhoods that the communities of homeless live. So I've had situations where we've done this kind of outreach. We have people who are ready, to be housed that day, ready to take housing that day, but it's too distant from where they are accustomed to being. And so I don't know how we're going to realize cost savings when we don't have enough permanent supportive housing upon which the cost savings analysis is based. It's 100% filled, 100 and 200% filled probably. There's waiting lists. So if you get these 10 super users into housing, there's 10 other people who aren't in housing. And so they're going to become the next super users. So I guess maybe you can speak to that from LASA's perspective. How are we going to deal with the fact that the ultimate goal of the outreach really is to provide housing? We don't have any housing.
And LASA is at the forefront of as housing first is our model, and we do want to get these folks housed. And we have, as we've built up our systems, we are aware of, we have a better understanding of who's out there. Now, for the frequent users, we do recognize that there might be some more availability for those that are chronically homeless. We can get those housed, but it is true, we don't have enough housing stock. And as we work together, this is something we want to continue working with the city and county to expand housing, because ultimately that is our goal as well. But there are things that we try to do in the meantime to build our systems up. As we're trying to build housing, what do we do? Provide bridge housing, put people in some emergency or crisis intervention programs that do work. So these are things we are bringing at the table, and through the Housing and Poverty Committee, we hope to continue having that discussion, and that the City Council can also weigh in on this huge housing problem that we do have in the city.
So the first goal of this kind of outreach will be identifying who the greatest super users are, and then providing permanent supportive housing if possible. But there are additional benefits that come from it, because even without permanent supportive housing, if someone is determined to be a veteran and there's VA benefits that they're not getting, maybe that is a way to help that person and reduce some of the costs. If they require drug addiction treatment or mental health treatment that they're not getting, and you can help especially if it's not always the black uniform. Maybe there's a way that we can
I think
get
that
them
in it too, in this
into these
proposal
services.
or in this effort, this pilot, would also loss of providing transportation services. Oftentimes, that's a critical need that our clients do have, getting them to appointments, linking them to services that they do need, and also making them aware that they might be available, because we might uncover that, oh, this is a veteran, this is a family. We can get them connected to the resources. And is there a way to also, we still have teams out there providing diversion services if possible. So our other teams are working to target the general homeless population.
Well, full speed ahead. The more the better. Money very well spent. Thank you.
Colleagues, additional questions? I mean, the other thought, just to your point, is that my other hope in something like this is that we better quantify the savings that we're getting, and maybe that helps us align the costs and the benefits, because if we can, part of the reason why we don't have enough money for supportive housing is because we don't realize that by putting money in there, we're saving money on all these other places, or we realize it, but there's no way to tap those other resources. But the more we can quantify, the easier it will be to get contributions, not only from the police department for supportive housing, but also from emergency rooms and from all the different beneficiaries of outreach to the homeless who get some sort of a savings out of there. If we could tap into some portion of that savings, we'd create a positive cycle. Anyway, I think we all seem to be in strong agreement that this is a good program to move forward with. Lots of expressions that we want to see this move forward in other districts, so the faster we can get a good pilot program, the faster we can expand it. So the recommendation is going to be to approve the request with the addition of Mr. Bonin's recommendation. We're going to add in the recommendation that you report on progress. What did we say, 90 days?
After 90 days.
After 90 days. Without objection, those two recommendations are the will of the committee, and it is so ordered. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the council.
Now we have the last item.
Item number 4, ostensibly is from the Mayor's Office of Budget Innovation. It really was a submission by Nancy Perlman, who was our Goldhirsch Fellow for the last year. It was around a leadership training program, and I'd like to just walk a little bit through the history on this. Quite frankly, we have a number of personnel crises here within the city, both current and pending. The current problem, frankly, is a lack of leadership roles and filled positions by women. And when Nancy and I met with the commission to talk about how we can create a leadership development program within the city, there's a lot of positive feelings around that within the commission. We shared that with city attorney for feedback, and we were told that that was exclusionary and we could not create a leadership program strictly for women. So I thought, frankly, for working in the private sector and doing this for a living, I thought that was interesting, I'll just say. However, we also have some pending problems in departments like ITA, where there is a cliff of retirees coming very soon. We have a lack of certain types of knowledge within the pool of resources that are staying. And we wanted to create a leadership program that would help that community be more confident of their skills, make the City of Los Angeles a employer of choice, and pilot a program where we can build those leadership skill set within the ITA as a pilot area, and hopefully we can get some really great stories out of that and scale the program further across the city for targeted areas of need within the city family. So we have Ted Ross here from ITA who can speak about it, because the funds are actually going to be allocated to ITA for this pilot. And Ted, would you like to add?
Certainly. Ted Ross, General Manager with the ITA. We are proud to be a partner with the Mayor's Office and Personnel Department for this innovative pilot of what's called the CHX Leadership Program. Certainly, as some of the council members and councilwomen is familiar with from last week's Women's Equality Day, technology is a fantastic industry in the city of Los Angeles. It is growing monumentally. Folks who have jobs in technology make 70+% more than other jobs. It's a great growth industry, but unfortunately, men outnumber women 4 to 1 in technology jobs. Now, fortunately, I say another fortunate, at the City of Los Angeles and the Information Technology Agency, we actually have reasonably good percentages. So if we were to compare our programmers with other organizations, 42% of our programmers are female, and there's certainly plenty of room to improve, and there's plenty of room for improvement. So as a part of this partnership, we went ahead and are working with Personnel, Mayor's Office, to institute a leadership program. We're leveraging Cambridge Associates. It's an adaptive model of training in which we have both male and female, so we're really pushing for diversity, and we're improving section supervisors and other supervisors and division managers, improving their capabilities to grow in the ranks, to be better leaders, to be executives, and to make sure that they find a voice. So we're trying to promote diversity in leadership and management at the City of Los Angeles.
Great. And while you can't be exclusionary, according to the city attorney, you can do targeted outreach.
Yes.
Right, and that's would be a legitimate focus, is to have targeted outreach to women and really try to beef up those numbers. And I think that's an important goal.
Correct.
So what are some of the measurable outcomes of this project?
Sorry about that.
The initial thoughts around the program is that will improve self-confidence in the participants, which will result into improved managerial skills and smarter decision-making, which will increase workplace efficiency. So it's a 2-day workshop for 24 participants, but the intent is to provide them with some of those skills to make them more confident in the workplace and provide them with additional leadership training.
We've also been discussing with personnel some other potential metrics. We're looking at some baselines around management. So we're looking at 360-degree types of evaluation. So subordinates and supervisors are evaluating each other, trying to baseline that and compare it afterwards. We're also trying to take a look at just wherever we can try to quantify something that's very qualitative.
Great. I mean, I would urge as much of that as you can do, because while we may all see this intuitively as a good thing, if we ever want to scale this and do more of it, we're going to have metrics of some sort.
That's right.
And I get it's hard with the 2-day conference, but certainly are things to do, and I would urge you to include measurables in as much as it's possible.
As you know, the personnel department's implementing a new performance management system today, and so they are looking at how to quantify both baseline goals and performance over a period of time. And so we're tightly trying to tie in learning and development with that performance management system.
The personnel department was certainly very vocal. They said they used to apply these types of leadership programs in the past. There's been significant issues since, and so they felt that this would be a great pilot, not just around technology and improving IT managers, but something that'd be a pilot that they would want to deliver citywide. So they do see this as a springboard.
And just Raylan Napper, Personnel Department, to further address your question, we also have an engagement measurement tool, so that we can do a baseline study and measure these key drivers of employee engagement. Because when employees and managers are engaged, we have more productive, safe workplace. And so empowerment and many other drivers, we have that tool to measure that. So we can see, based on these leaders, key section managers and division managers getting this training, what outcomes then have the ripple effect throughout the organization. So that's a key measurement we have. Also, the training program works on real projects in the workplace. So they pick things to work on, and are bringing that right back into the workplace and have 90 days of ongoing coaching and follow-up on that. So we're seeing direct impact right then as well.
Well said.
Colleagues, any additional questions or comments? Great. Well, seeing none, I think this is a certainly worthy project, and I'm going to recommend that we approve it. Seeing no objections, that'll be the order of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where does that bring us?
We had general public comments, so that would bring us to the end of the meeting. I would just like to clarify that last item number 10.
Yes.
That it was actually 4 projects, but within one item. So what we're doing is we're adopting as amended, correct? And those amendments would be to include Councilmember Bonin's recommendation, his amendment, as well as to temporarily remove the first project that we discussed, which was the Bureau of Street Services pothole trucks project.
Right, to hold that in committee.
Hold that in committee and to modify the recommendations to reflect this change so we can move forward with all the other items.
Over them, and we'll ask for that item to come back. The next one with the itemized budget.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Without objection, so ordered. And that concludes this hearing. Thank you very much for being part of it.